Hi, this is Dani, and the channel is You and Me Living Free. And so part of that freedom for me is freedom from this battle with food. I call it food addiction. I know from the research in this book it might not be necessarily addiction, but it sure feels like it. It's this compulsion and all these bad habits that I have built up over years and years and years, and making me feel like I have no choice when it comes to food. So we're continuing our intuitive eating journey today with principle number 3, which is make peace with food. And if I could sum up my whole journey in one chapter, this chapter would be it, really, making peace with food. I've done so much, like I know so many of us had. I've been on every diet known to man. Not every diet known to man, but I mean, I've done the crazy ones, right? I've done the drinking the lemon water with molasses and cayenne pepper for 10 days straight, right? I've done every drastic and undrastic measure you can. I've been on Noom, I've been on Weight Watchers. I've decided to train to do a half marathon to lose weight. I've done so many different things, right? And I want peace. I want health and I want peace. It's brought me to this intuitive eating journey. And every time I even think about starting another diet, which is once in a while, I bring myself back to intuitive eating as the only solution that's going to work. And I swear if you read this book, you'll probably mostly agree. It is so jam-packed with research, and I'm not going to bore you with all that. And also, here's the thing about me. I don't memorize research. I read it through, I dig in as much as I want to, and then in my mind, it's a buy-in. I'm going to believe what you say. I'm not going to believe it. I'm going to look at what the study was, what they were comparing, and what it means to me. So I'm going to filter it through. I'm going to take what resonates with me or what I see as definitely indicators, right, that are good for me that I can use, and I leave the rest. I'm not going to memorize all the research or anything like that, but this book is so full of research. And in the last chapter, which was, what was the last chapter? Honor Your Hunger, which I'm still trying to do. When you're working on these principles, you're working on everything. So principle number 1 is reject the diet mentality. I do that on a regular basis as I consider another diet to help me to get into shape or whatever it is, or to reach some goal I want. And then there was honor your hunger. I'm still working on both of those on a regular basis. It's hard for me to know when I'm hungry sometimes, and I'll count the hours and think, okay, it's been 7 hours since I last ate. I know I must be hungry. And then I look inside and then I'm like, oh, okay, these few signs are here. But I'm so used to ignoring my hunger that my body's kind of given up. So it's a whole relearning process about, eat when you're hungry and honor your hunger and things like that, right? So chapter number 3 is make peace with food. And before I dig into that, let me read the intro to chapter 3. Call a truce, stop the fight. Give yourself unconditional permission to eat. If you tell yourself that you can't or shouldn't have a particular food, it can lead to intense feelings of deprivation that build into uncontrollable cravings and often binging. When you finally give in to your forbidden foods, eating will be experienced with such intensity, it'll usually result in Last Supper overeating and overwhelming guilt. Oh, this trap is so familiar to me. It's like they just looked into my soul and read it right out, right? This book goes on to talk about that whole cycle of deprivation. The last chapter was really dedicated to kind of the physical part of what happens when we are deprived and deprive our body of food and have all these restrictions. And then this chapter is related to the psychological effects. The forbidden object is elevated to an overvalued level of specialness. Okay, so in Weight Watchers, they probably don't now, but years ago when I did Weight Watchers, they had what were called red light foods. These are foods that you just do not eat. Overeaters Anonymous also had this as part of a food plan that you were going to follow. You were going to have certain foods that you said no to. You were just never going to eat. And the process of this book and a lot of the homework is about taking these foods one at a time that you have been depriving yourself and letting yourself have it. And what it says will happen is what I have found that actually happens. And that is, no, if I let myself have this, I'm just going to have it all the time. And I'm going to gain weight. It's going to be terrible because I'll eat it every day and because it's not good for me and blah, blah, blah. You have all these stories in your head, right? So what I have found to be true is that as soon as you take it off that list of, oh, I can never have it, or if I do, then I better repent the next day or whatever. As soon as I start having it, I go through what is just a noticeable pattern that happens. So here's what happens. You have one of those foods. It could be cheesecake. It could be, lately for me, literally, it has been homemade bread with butter toasted in the skillet because I'm on the road, right? So I have bread from the bakery and I put butter in the skillet and then I put the bread down and kind of soak up the butter and make like a toast. And it is so delicious. And I make sandwiches with it and I just eat it sometimes. But the thing is so funny. So at first when you start to make it, you're like, oh, this is so good. This is so good. And then I was eating it a lot. I'll eat it a lot, right? Once or twice a day even, maybe sometimes. And then what happens is it's still delicious, but it's not like, oh, I was making 3 pieces. And then I was like, okay, well, two is just as good. I'll, have this other food or whatever. And 2 is just as good. And the last time I made 1 piece and I was like, wow, this is delicious, but kind of take it or leave it. Like it just loses eventually it just loses that specialness that forbidden stuff has. That personality trait that when someone tells you, hey, don't do this, it's like the first thing you want to do, especially as an adult. I was not a defiant child. I was a very conforming child. I did not rebel or anything. I was very people pleasing. I was very kind of in that, dysfunctional environment. I was the people pleaser. I was the one who tried to keep the boat from rocking, right? That was my role. So I was not super rebellious as a child. I was not the 2 or 3-year-old who, if you would say no, they would, go ahead and do it anyway. But as an adult, especially as a divorced adult, when I gave up so much of that and got more healthy, I became one of these people who I'm like, don't tell me not to do something. And it's not like it's not like a big control thing that someone could use it to make me think, oh, I'm going to do that now. But it rubs me way the wrong way. And you realize you're doing this to yourself again and again and again, saying, no, you better not. No, you better not. Don't you dare. And then there's that rebellious part of you. But it's more than that psychologically. And having these forbidden foods does. Psychological forces wreak havoc with your peace of mind. They trigger cravings, obsessive thoughts, and even compulsive behaviors. So this is me. I feel like the compulsive behaviors are huge for me. And this is where I started kind of calling it a food addiction, even though, like I say, I'm not going to use that language anymore. But the compulsion and then the habit of having the compulsion, and it feels like I have no choice. Then what has started to happen was I would give myself simply a few minutes before I would eat, just thinking about it. Okay, I notice that I'm hungry. What am I going to have? Or I notice I really want to eat right now, but I'm not hungry. I notice that I really want to eat right now, but I'm not hungry. I wonder what's going on. I'm kind of bored. I'm kind of this. I'm kind of that. Originally, I thought that if I just brought awareness to that it would stop the compulsive eating. Like if I could just take a breath and say, oh, look, I'm not hungry. This is just conditioning and habit, and I may be trying to avoid something here. Let's take a look. I thought that just the process of doing that would immediately stop my compulsive eating. And it's not true. It didn't for me. It didn't. I thought awareness was the key to everything. And then I got very frustrated because I thought, I have an awareness that I'm eating when I'm not hungry, but here I am still eating when I'm not hungry. Not only eating, but sometimes just the binging, sometimes just the stuffing the food in the mouth super fast. It's almost kind of like fast until you can make yourself stop, or until you feel almost sick because you're so full. Boy, I just lay it all on the line. I just lay it all out there, don't I? There are no secrets. But how is anybody ever going to... It's a painful topic. There's a lot of stuff here, and it's very deep, and it's very real, and it's very painful. And these habits and these compulsions that I and a lot of other people have, there's such guilt, there's shame, there's all this stuff around it. So by being vulnerable, hopefully I am helping myself to process through this and to stay on this path. Hopefully I'm helping anyone else to see some of this within themselves, to whatever internal guidance this guides them to, whether it's to, reading the books and doing this or doing whatever else there is. There are a bunch of podcasts about this. There's whatever it triggers in you, but it's not about food. It's not really about food. It's about making food, something else. And when you take the food off the pedestal and you say, I can have that anytime, or I'll eat the bread with the butter or whatever, and I think, I don't want to put too much butter. And then I'm like, I just slathered it in butter. And then I got to the point where I'm like, well, that was too much butter. I didn't think there'd ever be a point where it's too much butter. That was too much butter. Let me cut back a little bit. This tastes better and it's crispier and blah, blah, blah. When you take the taboo away and you give yourself permission, you find that you actually do come to more of a moderate place. And now this is me. This is just the beginning of my journey. Here's the thing. I will eventually be an intuitive eater. And the reason I will be is because I'm not going to give up. That's the reason I know I will be. And another thing you worry about is if I could have anything I want whenever I'm hungry until I'm full, then why would I ever eat anything healthy? That's one of the things in my mind, because it doesn't taste as good as some of the stuff that is not good. Let me tell you just a tiny little example from my own life that has started happening. And I make these little Sammies with my bread that I was talking about that's toasted with the butter. And then I put either beef or chicken and some pepper jack cheese and some onions and peppers. And when I first started with the onions and peppers, I was like, keep it kind of healthy. Let's get a little veg in there. And I made it with the onions and peppers. I didn't feel like doing all the chopping the other day. So I just ate it with the meat and the cheese and the mayo and the butter and the bread. Anyway, no shame. I'm not shaming myself at all. That's how I ate it. And as I was eating it, I was like, this would be so much better if I included the onions and the peppers. And what the research says is that if you are a natural intuitive eater, or if you come to intuitive eating, and then they break down the nutritional value of the foods you eat, you are way better off than most people who diet and who have American diet, or who have the typical American diet, or people who diet off and on. You eventually get to this point where if you can have everything, you go through all these foods that you think are forbidden and you let yourself have them, and you go through this period of and then I can have it anytime. Okay, I'll have some tomorrow, or I'll have some whenever. I've also started like saving food at the end. Like if I'm eating a meal, what I would normally prepare is this amount of food or whatever. And I'm just in the habit of doing that. So I prepare this much food and I'm like, wow, I'm really full and it's only 2/3 gone. Boy, that other third is going to taste so good when I warm it up at some other time. So I'll save it. I never used to do that. You just like eat it, especially if it's a forbidden food. You're like, I don't know when I'll get it again, so I better finish eating it and, be overly full or whatever. I just lost my train of thought. What was I what was I saying before I threw in that detail that I thought was so important, which it is actually. That's a big thing. Okay, let me go back and look. I've already done this whole thing without stopping. Like, I actually have a train of thought this morning. Anyway, let me go back. It wouldn't be a Dani video if I didn't forget my train of thought at least one time. Okay, so I'll be right back. Okay, the thought I was going to finish happened so much earlier in the video, but here's what it was. I'm going to come back to it because it's very important. I was thinking awareness is the answer. So when I have an awareness that I'm eating, that I have a compulsion to eat, even when I'm not hungry, if I can take a few minutes and just step back and look at that and then dig into maybe why am I bored? Do I just need something joyful and food brings me joy? What is actually going on here, and take a step back? I thought that compulsion to eat would then stop almost immediately. Like if I just took those couple of minutes, instead of like having that compulsion take over and following through with it immediately, versus just taking a couple of minutes to notice the compulsion, to notice I'm not hungry and I'm about to eat. Here's the thing. It's a long game. I'm convinced that awareness and taking that moment to pause will work in the long run, but I cannot expect it to work in a second, the first time I notice, or the second time, or even the 10th time. I'm in it for the long haul. So it's a long game, but awareness works. I'm convinced. I'm not trying to convince anyone else. I'm saying that to myself. I believe, I know that awareness works, but it has a lot of conditioning and a lot of time and everything to overcome. So I'm going to give it space to work. And most importantly, I can't shame myself because I'm like, wait a minute, I'm still eating, I'm not hungry, and there's so much reason to shame yourself in that. Like, I had the awareness and I'm still eating even though I know I'm not hungry. There's so much shame and disgust, and like, how little willpower do you have to be like that? Willpower is not the name of the game anymore. The name of the game is awareness, is acceptance, is presence of mind, being in it for the long haul. And that's what I wanted to say. And I'm glad I went back to like 5 or 10 minutes earlier in the video to that thought I wanted to complete. And now I'm ready to kind of reassess and then have some final thoughts. One of the things this part of the book emphasizes, this chapter in the book emphasizes, this principle is all about, is it has to be unconditional permission to eat. So they're not saying that some foods don't have more nutritional value than other foods. That's not what they're saying. This book was written by nutritionists. So that's not what they're saying. What they're saying is, if you are focusing on more good foods, less bad foods, kind of like Noom, the diet program that's crazy, like out there like crazy right now. Anyway, if you are labeling the foods and you're still giving yourself permission to eat, but your mind is still calling it a bad food or whatever, this is a whole psychological process. It is not ending up with, eating this because it's good, eating that because it's bad. This book asserts and shows with research that all of us are intuitive eaters when we start, unless there's an issue of food shortage in our home or in our country or in our culture, or for whatever reason, right? If we're born in a situation where food is not available to us and readily available to us, without that, Each and every one of us is an intuitive eater. But then think about you're a toddler and you're growing up and you don't want to eat lunch, you're busy having fun, whatever. Your mom's like, you're going to eat. You can have that, but not until you eat lunch. You can have that, but not until you can have a sweet, but not until you eat your carrots or whatever. And then in school, it's like it's lunchtime. There's the bell that rings. Now, like a good little factory worker, we're training you to be. Now's the time you eat. Now's the time you sleep. Now's the time you go to the bathroom. Now's the time you do everything. It's kind of conditioned out of us. And then, parents who, I don't think there are many parents anymore who say, empty your plate, eat all the food on your plate or whatever. But, I think in past generations, there certainly were. But so I think we're all naturally kind of intuitive eaters. And when we get back to that, it's really just clearing out all the BS messages, all the shame, the guilt, the judgment. And in order to do that, we have to have unconditional approval to eat. And this can be hard, but I am finding that when I do this with each individual food, I'm noticing this pattern that's happening of gorge myself on it for a little while. Yes, it's really yummy. Okay, I got overly full. That doesn't feel good. Then have it once in a while. Then I can have it whenever I want. So it is once in a while. They also don't, at this point in the process, emphasize stopping eating when you're full. Now, this is a big part of the overall process, but this is not the emphasis right now. The order they're taking everything through, they're bringing us through this process in order on purpose, because so much of this is psychological. There's biological factors, but there's also the psychological, the emotional, and all this training and everything that we've had. And also there's so much guilt and shame around food, around being fat, around all of it, right? So they're just tearing through some of that. And it's so hard to get your brain that's been so conditioned in these other ways for so long. But any little tiny sign of progress that I see, I am encouraged by. I'm happy that I'm doing this right now, talking about it, because it just reinforces. We don't take enough time to congratulate ourselves when we're doing a good job. We don't take enough time to celebrate everything that we're doing right. We're too quick to beat up on ourselves. Another huge part of this process for me is in accepting myself and loving myself just the way I am, and being happy to be here, being happy to be in this body, being happy to be alive. To be happy to be alive this moment. There were a whole lot of people around this whole world who did not wake up this morning, right? I'm here. I'm alive. I am doing everything I can, but I'm done doing these big drastic diets and stuff. I'm ready to just give my body what it wants, what it needs, when it needs it and wants it, and take this journey as long as it, for the rest of my life, be on this journey. And hopefully I'll get to the point where it is just natural and I'm not having to work at it or bring extra consciousness. It's just that natural thing that happens, that I feel hunger. I eat food that's nourishing to my body and my mind and my spirit and everything. And I feel no guilt and I feel no shame, even if that food for that particular day is a piece of French toast or whatever, right? Like one food, one day, one choice here and there is not going to make or break whether you're healthy or not. So it's so important to take these one step at a time. And I'm constantly telling myself, I've had so many years. I remember I grew up thin. I grew up, not really muscular, but pretty lean, pretty thin, until I was like 19 or so and started going to the bars. Drinking too much and then eating a fourth meal at like 3 a.m. every day. Anyway, But that was tied up in a lot of other things too. That's a story for a different day. But I was always really thin. I always ate whatever I wanted. I worked at McDonald's from the time I was 16 to 18, and I had a double cheeseburger and fries every day. And people would just tell me, how are you so thin? It's going to catch up with you. 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 And then, of course, it did, because I think it was just more psychological than anything, right? But we have all this messaging and stuff. So a big part of what I'm doing is just congratulating myself, keeping track of any progress. Even when it feels like it's not progress, I know it's part of this journey, so I'm still grateful for it. One day, not that long ago, probably a month ago or so, I was craving a lot of my cravings aren't sweets, they're savory things. So it was butter and noodles, ramen noodles with the chicken flavoring, right? And I was craving it, and it was kind of at night before bed, but I was hungry, and I thought, oh, I'm going to have it. And then just like, oh, I'm going to have another one. And I ate 2 of them. And I was so full, and I was so miserable, and I didn't sleep that night. And the next day, I felt the guilt and shame, and then I was able to say, okay, but isn't this part of it? This is part of the process. And if I look at everything that happens as part of the process, then I don't have any reason to throw up my hands and say, this isn't working, this will never work, I'm going to stop. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to give up. This is what I'm doing. And every single thing that happens, even the stumbles and the falls and everything, remember, I'm like a toddler who is learning to walk. So every time I stumble, every time I fall, I'm going to be like that parent who isn't thinking, this child will never walk. Look how much they're stumbling around. No, the parent says, oh, that's just how we learn to walk. So every crappy thing that happens, I'm just going to say, this is me learning to eat intuitively. This is part of the journey. And encourage myself. And I'm encouraging you right now, if I can in any way, encourage you to love and accept yourself, to know that whatever situations we're in, we're doing the best we can. We always are. Just follow your intuition to wherever it's guiding you about what to do about it. And there will be the guilt and the shame has no place in this conversation. We have been guilted and shamed by society, by parents, by well-meaning people, by doctors, by so many people, and mostly by ourselves. So anything we can do to end that guilt and shame and that judgment and self-hatred and self-loathing that comes from, you can't even control what you're putting in your mouth. Like all those horrible things we've said to ourselves, noticing any of them and noticing is the first step. And then be kind. I'm the toddler. I'm learning to walk. I'm a grown-up learning to intuitive eat. It's the same thing. We're just learning and growing, and we're doing the best that we can. So please be easy. Be easy with yourself. Make it easy to mess up and then to learn whatever that is and then to move on and mess up again. That's the process of growth. That's the process of life, And that's what will help us to not give up when things get hard, because we know it's just part of the journey. Things get hard. It's part of the journey. Messing up, it's part of the journey. It's no reason to quit or give up. So anyway, I'll put the link for the book and the workbook down in the description if you're interested in picking them up. I just don't see how it would be a bad idea for anyone. I think it's just, of all the diet books, I have read so many books. I have done so many programs. I have all of it. This is what I'm doing now, and this is the last thing that I'm doing. I'm not doing any of that other stuff anymore. I thank you for being here. And I'm sending you a ton of love. I'm sending it out right now, and I hope you feel it. So, sending you love, hoping you're loving yourself, and let's do this. This is the end of a video. If you've reached it, then you deserve a medal. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank my subscribers, thank my patrons, thank everybody, and I'll catch you next time.